Gaslighting isn't always loud or obvious. It doesn't always look like screaming matches or outright lies. Sometimes it's a subtle comment, a dismissive glance. Hey, friend, welcome back to the Art of Managing Your Brain podcast. I'm Dr. Charlie Hornis, and today we're tackling a term that is often misunderstood but carries devastating consequences: gaslighting. Now, you may have heard this term thrown around a lot, but here's the thing. Real gaslighting is not a joke. It's not about simple disagreements or misunderstandings or differences of opinion. Gaslighting is a calculated tool designed to make you question your own reality. It is intentional, and its impacts, they're far-reaching, from eroding confidence to lasting physiological changes in your brain. So in this episode, I'm going to take you through what gaslighting truly is and where the term comes from, how it rewires your brain, creating self-doubt and deep-rooted anxiety, and how to identify gaslighting in your own life and take actionable steps to counter it. So by the end of this episode, you'll not only recognize gaslighting when it happens, but also have the tools to disrupt its effects and reclaim your own narrative in your own life. So, are you ready to learn all about gaslighting? Then let's go.
I'm Dr. Charlie Hornis, highly anxious people pleaser turned master certified professional life coach. Learning to manage my brain was so life-changing for me that I got certified so that I could teach these incredible evidence-based practices to you. Are you ready for massive change? Let's go.
Before we dismantle today's topic on gaslighting, I've got a few quick little asks for you. If you're finding this podcast helpful, could you leave a review and a rating? Your feedback fuels me to create more episodes like this and help others discover the show. Also, if you know someone who might be struggling in a toxic relationship, workplace, or even with their own inner dialogue, please share our show and the episode with them. It might be the lifeline that they need. And finally, have you taken my free quiz yet? It's designed to uncover the thought pattern holding you back and provide you actionable steps to move forward. Are you struggling as a self-doubter? Are you a perfectionist? Are you an avoider or an approval seeker? You're going to discover exactly which one of these thought patterns is sabotaging your success. You'll find the link in the show notes, or you can just run to charliehorniscoaching.com/quiz and grab that right away. Let's get into today's topic, gaslighting. All right, I want to start off by defining gaslighting. And I promise this is not just a buzzword, though I know it's really popular right now and it's kind of overused, but let's get into what it really is. The term gaslighting originates from the 1944 film Gaslight, where a husband manipulates his wife into questioning her reality by dimming the gas lights in their home and then denying that it's happening. Over time, she begins to doubt her perceptions, her memory, and even her sanity. Gaslighting is a psychological weapon designed to distort your sense of reality. So here are the 3 hallmark traits of gaslighting. First, denial of reality. The manipulator denies clear, observable truths, even in the face of evidence. Second, eroding of trust. They make you feel like your perceptions or emotions are inherently flawed. 3, control. The ultimate goal is to destabilize you, giving them power over your decisions and your emotional life. All right, let me start with a truth bomb here. Gaslighting isn't always loud or obvious. It doesn't always look like screaming matches or outright lies. Sometimes it's a subtle comment, a dismissive glance, or even silence. But make no mistake, gaslighting is powerful and it costs us more than we realize. Let me ask you, have you ever second guessed yourself and thought, maybe I'm overreacting? Gaslighting thrives on doubt. Gaslighting thrives on your silence. So I want you to trust your gut. It's often picking up on manipulations before your conscious mind can even process them. All right, I always want to jump into my favorite part, a little bit of the science behind our topic today. So why does gaslighting even work? It kind of sounds absurd. It's not just psychological. It's physiological. You see, gaslighting triggers your brain's fear and stress response systems. It causes real, measurable change. Now, you've heard me mention amygdala hijacking before, and I plan to do an entire episode on this, but just a quick overview. So the amygdala, your brain's fear center, and everything else, survival brain, lizard brain, all the things we've called it on this show, your amygdala goes into overdrive. This puts you in a constant state of fight or flight or freeze or fawn, leaving you hypervigilant and emotionally reactive. So this automatically happens and you're not able to respond in the moment thoughtfully because you are in full reactivity. Second, the hippocampal suppression. Chronic stress impairs your hippocampus, which is part of your brain responsible for your memory. Now, this makes it harder to recall events clearly, something gaslighters exploit. So often you can be easily convinced that maybe you thought something was something and it wasn't, or you misremembered. And third, your prefrontal cortex impairment. The stress also impacts your prefrontal cortex, your thinking brain, your adult brain, your evolved brain, which governs logic and decision making. This makes you more vulnerable to manipulation because your thinking brain is entirely offline. So here's how gaslighting impacts your brain on a physiological level. When someone gaslights you, it triggers your amygdala, that part of your brain that's responsible for the fear and the emotional responses. This floods you with that lovely neuromodulator, cortisol, that we talked about. And the cortisol hijacks your ability to think clearly. And it creates that fight, flight, freeze, fawn response that we've talked about. So over time, repeated gaslighting that is causing this reactionary response in your body, repeated gaslighting conditions your brain to expect stress. Then that part of your brain, that hippocampus, which helps you process and recall memories, begins to shrink under this constant strain. That's part of that brain damage that I've talked about how stress really does affect your brain. So this makes it harder to trust your recollections of events. Meanwhile, that prefrontal cortex, that part of your brain responsible for the logic and the decision making, becomes so much less effective. This is how you start questioning your reality. This is how it starts the snowball effect of you not being sure if you can trust your own memories, your own thoughts, your own beliefs of what you believe happened, even in situations where you are certain, 99.9% certain of the facts. This is why gaslighting doesn't just undermine your confidence. It actually rewires your brain. It changes the neural pathways, making it so hard to trust yourself again. It takes a lot of work to get back from that place, and I don't want you going there. Okay, so just a quick rundown. Trigger. Gaslighting invalidates your reality. Response. Your amygdala floods with cortisol. Result. Chronic self-doubt rewires your brain. Now, how can you recognize gaslighting? So here are 3 key signs. You're always apologizing, even when you've done nothing wrong. You doubt your memory, even when you're sure of what happened. You feel like nothing you say or do is ever enough. This constant tension leaves you walking on eggshells. So, quick reminder, always apologizing, doubting your memory, walking on eggshells. So now that you know the signs, let's talk about how to respond to gaslighting. So how can you counteract this awful thing? It's weaponized psychology. So here are 3 actionable steps. The first is to anchor yourself in facts. You can do this by writing down what happened immediately after a high stress event. As soon as you get your bearings, as soon as your breathing calms, as soon as you can focus, go and write it down. This goes back to a couple episodes where I talked about potentially just shooting yourself an email that will be time stamped and date stamped. And then you just shove it in a file and do not write the emotions down. Just write facts. This is what happened. This is what happened. And it creates a tangible record that you can revisit later when you're not remembering something because your brain didn't code it in the moment. But write down as best you can, because right after something happens, some big event, and your brain finally comes back online, you can remember as much as you possibly can and get it somewhere down on paper where you can go back and look at it. Second, talking about setting boundaries. Now, I know we talk about boundaries a lot, but boundaries, if you really get what they are, if you know what a real boundary is and how to set a real boundary, then this is gold. You don't need to convince a gaslighter of your truth. State your reality and disengage. You do not need somebody who is gaslighting you, who is convincing you that what you believe to be true is not true, to co-sign your truth. It's not happening. So state your reality and disengage. 3, find allies. Seek validation from trusted friends, a therapist, a coach, a partner. This helps rebuild trust in your own perceptions. And it never hurts to run things by friends. And it's not I need you to fix this. It's more of would you validate whether or not what I'm feeling sounds real? How would you respond to this? This is what I did. This is what I said. This is how I thought. This is how I reacted. How does that sound to you? Does it sound reasonable? What would you do instead? I mean, have these conversations with people you trust, because getting that external validation, it's not that you need approval. What you just want to know is, are your feelings seemingly valid, or is there really a lot of room for misremembering, making some kind of mistake or, off decision? And that's okay if you did, but you need to take it to somebody else. Like I said, gaslighting feeds on silence. So talk it through with people you trust. When you feel your reality is being questioned, pause and document the details. What was said, what you observed, and how you felt. It's not about proving anything to a gaslighter, to somebody who is telling you what you believe to know is true is not true. And then, kicks you into cognitive dissonance. And then you topple over that threshold that I talked about. You transgress the threshold of your level of tolerance of bullshit. And you don't know where that threshold is until you've toppled over it. And then it's too late. This is not about proving anything to the gaslighter. It's about giving yourself a clear foundation of truth to revisit later. So when doubt creeps in, these facts serve as an anchor, reminding you that your perception is valid. So talking to allies, writing it down, stating your truth, and then disengaging. All of these things are going to remind you that your perception is valid. Your truth is your truth. And that's how you start reclaiming your confidence and your own reality back. So one question a lot of people have for me is, why do women seem to be most vulnerable to gaslighting? Women are often socialized to prioritize harmony over confrontation. Traditionally, women were the homemakers and wanted to keep a relatively calm home for babies and for small children and later for volatile teenagers. And so women are socialized over generations to prioritize that harmony over conflict. making them more susceptible to gaslighting. Another thing is the cultural conditioning or socialization. What I talk about all the time, how we are deeply immersed from the moment we're born into a socialized belief system, gendered biases, gendered expectations. Women are taught to be nice. Women are taught to accommodate. Women are taught to be self-sacrificing, making it harder to call out manipulation. When you are not, quote, nice, and by the way, caveat, nice is a dirty word. It goes in there with burnout and all the other stuff, self-care and all of these nonsense words. Nice is passive aggressive. Nice is about yourself. You want people to think you're nice, not unnice or whatever. Kindness is what matters. Kindness is setting boundaries. Kindness is real talk. Kindness is not letting somebody step over you. Kindness is not letting somebody gaslight you. And yet we as women have been culturally conditioned to be taught to be nice because we don't want to rock the boat, because we don't want to be seen as a troublemaker, because we don't want to be a loudmouth, because we don't want to be called a bitch. So we are nice. We accommodate. We are self-sacrificing. It makes it impossible to address manipulation. And next is the power dynamics. Often many of us work in male-dominated fields and workspaces that have this gender bias gap. Administration is male-dominated, but it doesn't trickle down like, working in hospitals and in schools as teachers. There's a lot of women there in the work field on your floor, but not these sort of higher up administrators that typically are still a lot of men in charge. So most of us are in male-dominated workspaces, or at least immersed in the male-dominated socialization of a workspace and how it's supposed to function. So there are power dynamics at play, whether you see them or they are systemic within the workspace that you function in. And many women may face these subtle biases that gaslighting amplifies, and it erodes your confidence over time. It's a slow burn. Most of the things I talk about are slow burns. They're insidious. They're hard to put your finger on. They're hard to exactly identify what was said. All you know is you feel yuck. For example, imagine presenting an idea in a meeting only for it to be dismissed when hearing it praised when a male colleague says the same thing. And you're sitting there going, is somebody going to acknowledge the fact that I just said the thing that dude just said and got praised for? That's a subtle form of gaslighting that reinforces doubt in your value. You don't have to doubt your value. You're dealing with systemic issues and socialization and systems that are entirely immersed in value systems that are based in nothing and entirely made up.
I've got a place now where I can put everybody's resources in one storefront. What's really cool is when you use the what we call affiliate links, and I'm now becoming an affiliate for a whole bunch of different things. It's all on my website at charliehornesscoaching.com. And it's on the bonus resources page. What happens is when you purchase something off of that, a portion of it goes back to the show. And so what you're doing basically when you buy from there is you're supporting the show at no additional cost to you, which is kind of like the coolest thing ever. It's going to help us continue to create content for you and bring on incredible guests that are, they blow my mind. So I'm hoping they will blow your mind too, whether it's metaphysics and psychology and theology or high fantasy romance. You're going to find your next favorite read right there. Let's go.
All right. So how do you start reclaiming your narrative? Gaslighting has hidden costs. For example, why am I doubting my reality? So here's an action strategy. You can do something called the Reality Validation Journal. Again, A lot of us don't like journaling. What did I say last time? Journaling is important because it slows us down and makes us think through things and engage our thinking brain we typically would not do when we're blasting through something. Like I said, I think so much faster than I can handwrite, and I hate every minute of it. But when I slow down, I think in a different way than when I'm blasting through typing something on a computer, right? So each day you can practice a discipline of writing down one situation where you felt gaslit or where you doubted yourself. And then for each of these situations, write down or identify 3 concrete facts that validate that perception that you believe, that you have, your reality. For example, I heard him say, I saw the email. I am absolutely sure. I know this is true. And then give yourself as many details of the situation as possible because you need the facts in your brain to validate your perception, regardless of whether it's validated externally by other people. And then practice reading this journal weekly as a discipline to reinforce trust in your own observations. What you believe to be true is as true as you can possibly believe it to be. And then this rewires that brain to rely on the evidence, not external validation. Your brain will believe when you've trained it to rely on truth, as in cold, hard facts, evidence versus other people's opinion and whether or not they validate you or not based on their decision-making ability. And if they're already withholding validation or they're gaslighting you, it's not happening either. So don't even expect it. All right. So let's go back to that idea of the reality anchor. So what you do is you decide on what you would call a reality anchor phrase. So you choose a personal affirmation. And I don't mean affirmation like fluffy nonsense. I mean something that grounds you and anchors you. Something like, I trust what I see, hear, and feel. Their reality doesn't invalidate mine. Just because someone doesn't agree with me doesn't mean I'm wrong. So think of some of these. Repeat something like this that grounds you, anchors you into your reality and your confidence in your evidence. And repeat the phrase 3 times whenever you're feeling like someone is questioning what you believe to be true. This interrupts the cycle of self-doubt and it anchors your brain to a steadying truth. Then we need to reframe that doubt. When someone denies your reality, you need to remind yourself simply, their version of reality does not have to match mine. It doesn't have to invalidate mine because all versions of reality are simply your brain's interpretation of neutral circumstances that are external to you, but everybody interprets them differently. So what I believe to be real may be very different than what you believe to be real based on your story, your lens, your experience, and how you're filtering the circumstances around you. And the thoughts that your brain generates, which creates feelings that you have about the circumstance that can be extremely different than the person standing next to you. So somebody's perception of what they would identify as reality does not invalidate yours. They're not mutually exclusive. Both can exist at the same time. This is one of those things you can agree to disagree on, right? Justice issues, not so much, but somebody else's perspective on reality, definitely, and be fine with it. You don't need them to validate you. Remember the documentation. Document the moments when you can. If you're really in a toxic environment, if you're really feeling like you're dealing with dysfunction, hostility, you're confused, you're miserable, you're stressed, you're ready to leave because you feel like you're getting pushed out, this is a time to make sure you're documenting and logging any incidents where you feel these types of psychological weapon, fancied or real, imagined or not. If you feel like they're happening to you, then you should be writing them down, emailing them to yourself, writing them in a journal or a log, but preferably something that is timestamped. You need to write down what is said, what happened, and how it made you feel, but not in an emotional place, just identifying the feelings that generated from the situation. It isn't proving anything to anybody. It isn't asking for validation of others. It isn't people pleasing. It's simply to validate your own experience for yourself. And then you need to create that affirmation anchor. Like I said, write down the truth about yourself that you can return to when that doubt creeps in. I trust my perception because they've guided me this far. Something to that. Look, let's back up and think about the things we just talked about. We need to anchor ourselves in facts and create that anchor phrase. We need to work on boundaries and we need to find our allies. And then we have to make sure that we're never looking for external validation, especially from the people that are already withholding your validation in the first place. So here's the most important thing to remember. Gaslighting isn't about you. It's about control. You're not crazy. You're conditioned. Gaslighting isn't a reflection of your worth or your intelligence. It's a tactic used to control you by making you doubt yourself. This conditioning starts early, reinforced by a society that often questions women's perceptions, minimizes our experiences, and expects us to go along to get along, to be nice. But here's the truth. Their manipulations don't define you. When you recognize the patterns of gaslighting and choose to step out of them, when you choose to get into the plane with me and get up above all of this and look down on the system for what it is and get out of the emotional traps, when you recognize the patterns of gaslighting, the feelings of gaslighting, and choose to step out of them, choose to get above them, you reclaim your narrative, and that's how you take back your power. All right, so just a quick overview. Gaslighting is one of the most insidious tools of manipulation, but understanding it is the first step to reclaiming your reality. So here's some homework this week. Take 10 minutes to reflect on a moment when you doubted your own perception, when you felt invalidated. Write it down and use the tools that we've just discussed to rebuild trust in your own mind. You have to begin to build evidence in your evidence file that it's okay to disagree with somebody. It's okay for somebody to try to tell you that what you remember is being misremembered. It doesn't matter. They can think that all day long. You don't have to agree with it. You can feel validated in your own reality, in your own remembrance of something that happened. And the more you retrain your brain, the less likely you're going to get amygdala hijacked and be living in fight or flight or freeze or fawn and not coding memories. Eventually, you're going to become very intentionally aware in the moment when these things are happening. But it takes practice and rewiring your brain. All right. If you found this episode helpful, share it with somebody who needs these tools. And don't forget to take my quiz and find out, are you a self-doubter? Are you dealing with people pleasing and approval seeking? Are you dealing with perfectionism, overthinking? Are you an avoider? You're going to discover one of these that is your main saboteur that is sabotaging your success as a thought pattern. So grab that quiz at charliehornisscoaching.com/quiz and let me know what you discover. You can always put it in the comments and we can chat about it. So it's a quick way to uncover and shift the thought patterns holding you back. And you will receive an interactive guide for your particular thought pattern. So thanks again for listening to The Art of Managing Your Brain. And don't forget, your reality is valid and your voice matters. So don't fall into a gaslit trap. All right. I'll see you next week.